Hey friends, good morning. This is Ashley over at Uncommon Roots Homestead, and I wasn't gonna make a video today, but look at this fog. Isn't that crazy? Let's take a look at the farm in the fog. I don't know about you guys, but I think there's something so cool about seeing the farm in different seasons and different types of like weather. Like being out here in the fog makes it just feel like a totally different world, which is funny. I know. Of course we're gonna have fog. It's like I know that that's ridiculous, but it's almost magical. Right? I feel like I'm in like a European movie or something with all of the haze and just I need some like dramatic music or something. But since we're over here, we're gonna go get Fury out, get him a little bit of exercise this morning, and then we're gonna check over on the chickens because we got that one little fairy egg couple days ago, and then we haven't gotten any more, but I'm afraid that maybe they're laying like under the coop or like maybe places that we're just not checking. So we're gonna do like a deep search for eggs today and see if we can find them, because that one little fairy egg was 2 days ago and we haven't gotten another one from her. And usually, at least in my experience with the chickens that we've raised, they like once they start laying, they don't go that long before they lay their next egg. Like maybe a couple of days, but I would assume that we would get another egg today. So I'll take a look for that. And then we're also looking for a set of keys that I may have misplaced earlier this week. I'm thinking that maybe I dropped them when I was running away from George or something. So we're gonna be just kind of looking, but I mean, we have a lot of, our land goes all the way back to where you can see there, and like I didn't go in the woods, so don't have to worry about those. But I mean, all the way over, it's just, hi Fury, hi. Who knows where they are? You say hi to our friends? Hi, bud. Oh, Dad's moving your...
Okay. Okay. No. No. Okay. No. Down. No.
I guess this is also another opportunity for me to show George that I'm dominant. I'm working on it. It's like the craziest thing to go from like having no fear of the chickens to having a fear of the chickens, because not of the chickens, but of George, literally like overnight. And so that's something that I'm definitely having to work through. So if you have ever had a fear of chickens or a fear of a rooster, you're not alone. I'm feeling it too.
Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. Hold him for a second. What'd Jerry do to you?
He just ran at me.
Oh, did he? No. No.
But did you see me step at him?
No.
This is about where we found that other egg. Hey, OGs. This is Babs and Ginger. They're the original girls, huh? And Georgia. Oh, now everybody else. Well, it was just the OGs. Now it's everybody. Come on, Fear, let's walk. Well, it started raining, but we still only got a Babs egg and a Ginger egg. Is there a chance that tiny egg in the middle of the yard was a Babs egg and it wasn't actually a new layer? I don't know. I mean, I guess there's a chance that we're missing it. I mean, they have a lot of space in that yard. There's a chance that we're just not, I mean, was that like olive color? There's a chance we're just not seeing it. I don't know. I mean, I know sooner than later, like in a matter of weeks, they're all gonna be laying and we're gonna have tons of eggs. We're gonna have tons of eggs and it's not even gonna matter. But right now, when we're just getting 2 every couple days, you know, sometimes we just get 1 a day, sometimes we get none. It's like when we thought we were gonna start getting the new layers laying, it was so exciting, and now I'm just like bummed because this is 3 days without a 3rd egg. I'm super bummed. This girl refuses to put on her raincoat. It's not cold, it's like 60, but we have some errands we need to run today, so I prefer she's not soaking wet, but 3. Well, I guess let's take a look over at the garden. Look at Kevin. He's such a trooper. Where is he? There he is. He's got Liam strapped to his front. The dog food in one hand, and he's gonna go fill up his water. But anyways, I'll take you guys over to the garden before we go over there. Georgia's just so pretty. I mean, this is why I do hear Fury crying. He's just so pretty. This is why I want it to work. And I actually think it's gonna. Today he didn't bother me at all. I walked towards him when he came close to me just to show him that I was in charge. I also had Fury. But he's such a pretty rooster. And he's a cuckoo marin. So we had 2 cuckoo marins. And obviously one ended up being George, so the other is Georgia. Hey, George. But they will lay those dark brown eggs, not as dark as like a French marin. But we actually have 2 or 3 midnight marins as well. And the midnight marins are the black chickens that we have, and they will lay those like dark chocolate eggs. That's actually a mixed breed, and it's a French marin with now I'm not gonna remember, but it's like a mixed breed. We got them from Hoover's Hatchery, and they should lay those really dark chocolate. So we have Americanas, we have some salmon Faverolles. We have both of the types of marins. We have 2 Isa Browns, which are just like production browns. Actually, Ginger, our original chicken, she is similar to an Isa Brown. She is a, what was she called? Golden Comet. She's a Golden Comet, which basically there's like a handful of names for these like production brown layers. They're all really similar. They're crossbreeds that have been bred over the years to just lay a lot of eggs in a relatively short period of time. Like they'll only lay for like 3 or 4 years, and then they'll be done for the most part. They end up with like more issues too, ovarian issues. And now the rain is coming. But then we also have some olive eggers. I think the only color that we might be missing, and then we have 2 white layers, leghorns. So I think we're gonna have a really pretty variety of eggs here eventually, but right now it feels like they're never gonna lay. I don't know if anybody else is in that kind of boat where it just feels like it's gonna be forever. But like all good things, patience. Hey friends, it is obviously a different day. It's actually like 2 days later than we were just chatting. But I wanted to jump on and talk about a couple of things that you can do now before spring, right? We've talked about how it's fake spring. We've talked about how there is, you know, this desire to get started, but maybe not the best time. So I wanted to talk about 3 things that you can actually do right now in preparation from spring. So I am in our multi-purpose seed starting grow light bonus room. And I was just thinking, what do I do in the months before spring when the weather is warm and it feels like we should just get started, but it's not quite time? So the first thing is make a plan. This is the best time to determine what you're gonna do when it finally is spring, right? Like sometimes I think we sit and we wish and we wait and we wish and we wait and we wish and we wait, and then before we know it, it's here and we didn't do anything to get ready for it. So then we end up, if you're anything like me, you end up actually behind and playing catch up all season long because you never actually did the prep work to get started on the right foot, which is never fun. So the first thing is make a plan. So you guys have seen this before. This was my plan for the protege garden. Obviously I did this a while ago, but if you don't have a plan yet, make a plan. And I'm not talking about design. You don't have to have a brand new garden where you're like figuring out where beds are gonna go and figuring out what trellises you want. Like you don't have to have all of that. What you need is to have a kind of a game plan on where you're gonna plant certain varieties. There are some varieties, if you're gonna be planting really close together, that do really well together, and there are some that don't. So understanding kind of those nuances based on what you wanna plant are really important. So when I went ahead and did this, I wrote down what is gonna go in each of these beds. So beyond just having like, you know, the 9 6x3 beds and then the 4 longer beds and then beyond all of that, I actually wrote down what was in each area, kind of trying to think through as I walk through the garden and as things are maturing in kind of like different sub-seasons, right? Everything, this is your first time gardening. Pro tip, everything doesn't ripen at the exact same time. So that's really important to understand, because if you know, are banking on, I don't know, like you planted 1 jalapeno plant, 1 tomato plant, and some onions, and you put them all on the ground on the same day, and you think that in 50, 60 days you're gonna be making salsa, like you're definitely not. That's not how it works. Onions are gonna take over 100 days. Peppers are gonna be longer than tomatoes. Tomatoes are gonna ripen at different times depending on if they're early varieties or late varieties. So kind of understanding when things are gonna ripen actually helps me when I'm planning where I'm going to put things, kind of visually understand, okay, you know what, my tomatoes are gonna need more work during, you know, maybe they're not going to need as much work when they're little, but then once I start pruning before the fruit starts ripening, they're going to need a lot of work, whereas my peppers aren't going to need as much work. So I kind of start thinking through, like, what am I going to need to focus on? What areas are going to go wild? You know, was I planning to put a squash or a cucumber next to something like a tomato, where all of those things are gonna go wild and crazy and they're actually not gonna have enough space? I try to think through that because that kind of helps me visualize what my garden will look like at the end of the day. It's also a good time to start planning where you wanna incorporate flowers. So last year was actually the first year that I incorporated flowers into the garden at all. And I planted zinnias in my beds with my tomatoes. So zinnias and tomatoes do really well together from my experience and from a lot of things that I've read or listened to. And zinnias grow wild and beautiful, and they'll kind of take whatever space you give them. And I felt like that worked really well with tomatoes. Another common flower to put with tomatoes are marigolds. So kind of thinking through what you want your garden to look like. You know, when you walk through your garden mid-June in like the peak of season, what are you looking for? Are you looking for flowers that are blooming? Are you looking for just kind of like a wild jungle? Are you looking for like really well pruned? Like what's the visual that you're trying to achieve? And then kind of work backwards from there. So what I did, I ended up putting, and now some people will say you want to spread your crops around, you don't want to put varieties near each other. There are definitely good reasons to do that. You know, the people kind of in the camp that you should not plant the same variety near each other, what they're trying to achieve is that if you end up with a pest, like so say you end up with really bad, I don't know, cucumber beetles. The thought is that if you don't have all of your cucumbers in the same place, those cucumber beetles might not get every plant. If you have all your cucumbers in the same place and you get cucumber beetles, they're all gonna go. I think that that's valid, like it's a valid thought process, but for me in the space that I've always gardened in, I don't have that much space, even this season and next season as I'm expanding the potager garden. Like that potager garden is not giant. I mean, it's big. It's definitely bigger than anything I've gardened in the past. I probably have about an acre of space that I'm gonna be using to garden in. Now, some of that has the blueberries or the fruit trees, things like that. But again, it's not like that. No plant is that far away from another plant, especially the way that I'm organizing the beds. And so for me, I'm like, well, no matter where I put my tomato plants or my cucumber plants for that matter, the cucumber beetle's probably gonna find the other cucumbers. Like, it's kind of one of those things where once you deal with the pest, I think in my opinion, it's easier to have that pest isolated to one location so that I can treat it accordingly. You know, if all of my cucumbers are together and I start dealing with cucumber beetles, I know that I need to really concentrate my neem oil and some of the other preventative measures on that area instead of having to like go to all these different spots all over the garden and look for those pests. So it's definitely two different camps or like thought processes, but I don't think any is right or wrong. It's just not how I do it. So with all that being said, I'm putting a lot of my things next to each other. So I've got like my tomatoes in these 4 beds right here. I'm dedicating 4 beds to tomatoes. My beds are 3 feet by 6 feet. So I can put I can put 6 tomato plants in those beds if I am being conservative with my spacing, and then I can I can drop some zinnias and like flowers in with them, or I can be a little bit more aggressive and put 8 in there if I'm going to be, you know, really serious about how I prune. And that would be like putting them every 12 inches. I would have another plant and then running a trellis in the middle or some kind of support in the middle. You want a support for tomatoes if you didn't know that. They don't vine, but you definitely need some kind of support. And then I would do on the other side as well. I am going to start probably way more than I need and kind of go from there. I always start out my garden planning conservative, and then it is time to put plants in the ground, and that all goes out the window. And before you know it, I'm like, you know, planting 32 tomato plants in a 6x3 bed, which I do not recommend. That is not good. You will actually hurt your harvest, and it's just not a good idea. But, you know, we're all still learning. We'll see what I do this year. I'm sure somebody will come back and remind me when I say I overplanted these tomatoes that I said in this video, you know, 3 months ago that I shouldn't do that. So anyways, I'm dedicating right now, as of this plan, I'm dedicating 4 3x6 beds to tomatoes, 1 bed for ground cherries. So I can probably put about 6 ground cherry plants in 1 bed if I dedicate the entire space for it. And we love ground cherries. That was one thing this year that was new to us, or like last year that was new to us. And we absolutely adore them. They're so good. I know that people either love them or hate them. We're definitely in the love them camp. In fact, Isla would go out to the garden every morning with a little basket, fill it up, and eat literally probably like 2 or 3 cups of those every morning. So I'm gonna dedicate a whole bed, and I only had 2 plants in a bed that was being shared with cherry tomatoes last year. So I'm gonna dedicate a whole bed to those this year because we love them. And then I dedicated a bed to lettuce and kale. Now kale is a brassica, but in my zone here, it's not super happy in the summer when it's really hot, but it'll grow all summer long. So I'm gonna try to keep that. Now my lettuce is probably not going to thrive midsummer for us. So I'm gonna plant some, hopefully as soon as we finish those beds, I'm gonna get some lettuce in the ground and some of my root vegetables in the ground right now. Now is the time to actually do that. But then I have these 3 beds that are already planted. I've got garlic and then 2 beds of onions, and those are actually gonna be ready to harvest at the end of May, beginning of June, and then I'll be able to re-sow those beds. So that's the other thing you wanna think about while you're in the planning stage is what's going to be moving out? So do you have any short season crops that are actually going to be done producing and ready to like have that spot open up where you can resow? Similar to my lettuce is going to come out. What am I going to put there? I try to kind of think ahead so that I have a plan right now while I'm starting all of my seeds, because if I want to put, lavender or something like that in there, I need to know that now so that I can actually have it started and ready. There's also succession planting, but we'll talk about that another time. I could probably talk way too long about that. So anyways, make a plan. All that to say, 10 minutes to say, my tip number 1 is make a plan. Because you can spend so much time dreaming and planning, and right now, before spring is here, that's the best time to do that. Because if you wait until the weather is warm, you're gonna actually, if you're anything like me, end up kind of making on the fly plans and they don't turn out quite as well. I've had a lot of time to think through the way that I organize this garden and what I'm gonna plant in it. And that helps me tremendously, because now that spring is right around the corner, I'm able to really start focusing on the varieties that I'm gonna start, making sure I'm nurturing those, and then kind of planning that out as I'm planting. So I'm not like trying to figure out where am I gonna put all these starts that I started. Instead, I'm only starting what I know I wanna put into my plan. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2 is, what about water? What about water? That might seem like a really logical thing to think about, but have you thought about it? If you are gardening in a new place, like I am this year, have you considered how you're going to water your plants? Or if you're expanding your garden, or if you're gardening in ground, and usually you garden in raised beds, what about water? It's really important. Not being able to water your plants will result in a dead garden. You can have a really lucky year where God takes care of all of that watering for you, but in my experience, there's always gonna be at least a week or 2 of time that you need to be diligent about being in the garden and watering your plants. So make sure that you have a plan for that. If you're expanding your garden, make sure that you either have access to enough water to hand water, or if you're gonna run irrigation lines, or if you're gonna have a rain barrel. Our plan this year is actually to increase the number of rain barrels that we have. We don't have running water on our property, which might sound a little crazy considering how big of a garden we are planting, but we have historically, traditionally, even right now, we have a really wet spring, and last year we had a really wet summer as well. And so our plan is to get a couple of really big rain barrels and catch a lot of that water, so that then we can water the garden. And actually we will have running water on the property before the end of the growing season. So it kind of all evens out. But make sure that you're thinking about water, because you have to have a backup plan, right? We have to have a backup plan. The plants are gonna need water no matter what. And the third thing is, consider perennials versus annuals. So right now is a great time. Well, spring is not quite here yet, but you really want to get out in the garden and you want to start doing new things. Now is a great time to start thinking about what perennials do you want to introduce to the garden that will give you year after year after year of value. And it's also a good time to plant a lot of those perennials. Unlike their annual counterparts that tend to be frost tender, there are a lot of perennials aren't usually frost tender because they're perennial. They come back every year. So you guys know we just planted 18 blueberry bushes. Now is the time to do that. Blueberries, raspberries, anything like that, any of those like bush varieties, now is generally, at least in our zone, in our climate, now is a good time to do that. Make sure you double check depending on what zone you're in. But it's a really good time right now as you're kind of, I guess, like pre-gaming spring. Make sure that you're thinking about what kind of perennials do you want to bring into the garden, because often perennials are not great transplants in mid-summer. And so, blueberries aren't going to do as well if we put them in the ground in 3 months, but right now they're going to do really great, and we'll probably get blueberries this year. So those are 3 things that I hope you spend some time thinking about in the waiting here. As we're waiting for spring to get here, it'll be here before we know it. I can't even believe that it's already March. I'm not sure where January and February have gone, but March is quickly passing and we'll be there with them before we know it. And then we're in spring, and then everything is going to get crazier. It's gonna get busy. We're gonna be doing garden tours every week. We're gonna be experiencing all of this abundance of growth and stress of pests and harvest and everything. But until then, take this time, plan your garden, plan what you're gonna plant, plan your water, how are you gonna get that water, and then take some time and plan out perennials versus annuals and what you want to contribute to the garden this year. Thanks for joining us, friends. Until next time.